Hello once again, everyone. So I got a new acquisition that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and also talk about sword length in general and kind of what that means. So first off, the new acquisition. So this is the Albion Ringgit that I got recently, just got yesterday, in fact. I have been wanting to get an Albion Sharp for a long time, basically as soon as I knew that Albions made Sharps. As you've seen in my sword collection video, I'm a pretty big fan of Albion. And for the longest time I really wanted to get a cutter from them, but either due to price point or mostly because I couldn't decide what I wanted, I never did until now. Now the reason I got this guy is there was a local fellow who had some Albions and was like, hey, I'm selling them, you're a sword school, I feel like you guys would get good use out of them, so I was like, yeah! And so I picked up this guy. Now I also am lucky enough that I picked him up with a rather nice scabbard to boot, so that's all fantastic, and I also have a belt that goes with this guy. But, all that aside, let's talk a little bit about the Ringgit and describe its feeling. So, first thing is that you'll notice it's not a wide blade. It seems similar to the Albion Mercenary that I featured on the channel before, but difference being the crossguard is a little larger, grip a little longer, and the blade is a little bit narrower. However, it does have that distinctive point that is common of the typology. It does have I don't know how well you can see that, but it has a sort of diamond cross-section and is relatively thick. When I look along the length like this, I can actually see where the point swells out a little bit. It's quite stiff and just really fantastic for hitting those gaps. But weight-wise and feel-wise, it is not uncomfortable to hold in one hand. I would say it is not quite to the point that you could fence fully with one hand, just because there's enough of it out there that once it gets going, I will not be able to recover quite in the same way, but it's close. It's just on the edge of that. In two hands, it feels fantastic. Relatively small, wasted grip, which even with my big hands, this feels very comfortable to hold. It's not quite like the Munich, which I also love the Munich, I do, and another one of my guys bought the Munich that this gentleman was selling, so I may feature it on the channel, but it's not quite so thin, so it does feel comfortable even in my bigger hands. It's got a scent stopper pommel, which I adore. I know there are people that like wheel pommels out there, but scent stopper is the style for me. And just overall, I really like its look, I really like how it feels, and the really nice thing about it, my first impression when I picked it up, because I have held Ringgits before, I have cut with them before, but it'd been a long time. My first impression was it felt like a sword I could very easily do the German style of swordsmanship with, or the Italian style quite easily, right? Which is a nice thing because I study both. Sort of lengthwise, it may seem not all that long for a longsword, but for comparison's sake, this is my Mier that I fight with regularly. If I put those forte to forte, you will see that my Mier is the tiniest bit longer, mostly in the grip though, not in the actual blade length. Balance point wise, it's a little more tip heavy than the Mier, but it also has, more blade to it, versus this is just, a training sword. But feeling wise, feels very similar in regards to everything I feel like I can do with the Mier, I can do with this guy without difficulty. Now, on that note, something that often surprises people is that my preference is to have something like the Mier or a shorter sword, even though I am a taller individual. And the main reason behind this is, partially it's because of the swords I liked. I got my Liechtenauer, was my first ever sword, and that one is only a tiny bit longer than the Mier, may even be exactly the same length, but I was used to that. That was my norm, and so I kind of stuck with that. My Chablowski that I fought with in tournament was much longer, and there were certainly advantages to it, but then one day I was at Long Point, I fought against Ben Strickling in an area about the size of one of our squares here, and we were fighting pretty much continuously, and I am so glad that I had the Mier as opposed to any other sword, because anything longer and I would be much more out of position after completing my cuts or defending myself. So having a shorter sword in that regard really blew my mind and made me appreciate length in that situation. And so generally, when it comes to measuring out a longsword, the measurement that I recommend people go with is you place your hand on someone's shoulder. You should be able to comfortably draw your arm back like so, and the tip should be able to, you could then thrust them. The reason I say that is because, I mean, we do get some historical recommendations. Some say that the tip should be on the ground and the pommel should be at your armpit, etc. I have fought with longer swords here and there. It's not a bad thing, but the reason I like that particular length is because that way it's just long enough that when I extend my arms, it's maybe double, almost a little bit more than my regular arm length, which is nice because that's not so long that I feel it's getting away from me. And the other reason is that if I close in, I know for a fact that I can get this back and ready to work for me. Same idea is because if it's that length, it's not terribly difficult for me to use with one hand. But I haven't gotten to cut with him yet. I certainly will be. I will say first impressions are all wonderfully positive. She's got a great sword wing to her. That nice whistle. Yeah, I always got a bit of a better whistle on my left side. But I will be cutting with this and maybe even stab some mail with it every once in a while. But all in all, that is the new acquisition, the Albion Ringgit, and I'm so excited to have one for myself. Just buying new sword feels. But either way, just a quick video talking about it, and you'll probably be seeing more of it, and the Munich as well if I can get my guy to let me borrow it to talk about it. But otherwise, just brief video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk about other swords another time.